everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be digging into some really fascinating source material today about education initiatives in Cambodia. This comes straight from the work of Phan Bunath over at CAP. That's the Cambodian Action to Promote Education. Now, you know we spend a lot of time thinking about how to actually improve learning outcomes, right? And honestly, we often fall back on some pretty deeply held assumptions about how development work is supposed to play out in the real world. So today, we're going to systematically unpack and maybe even deconstruct a few of those assumptions together. Okay, let's dive right into this by tackling the big anchor question driving this whole explainer. If a child is healthy, will that child necessarily learn? I want you to really think about your gut reaction to that, because so much of international development, social impact programming, and honestly, even just local school policy is built entirely around this one premise. The idea is, we see a hungry kid, we feed them, and boom, we expect their grades to just automatically go up. But as we're about to see, challenging that specific assumption is absolutely crucial if we want to unlock real, lasting educational progress. And here's where we hit a bit of a hard truth. We all love what's called the linear promise. I mean, it's emotionally satisfying, and let's be real, it's incredibly easy to fund. This promise basically tells us that feeding hungry kids directly equals learning. It's this clean, straight line. But the reality on the ground is way more complex. A child who is hungry or sick, exhausted, feeling unsafe, they simply cannot learn. So health is absolutely 100% a necessary condition. You literally can't bypass it. However, and this is the kicker, it is fundamentally not a sufficient condition. Just because a kid has a full stomach and a clean bill of health doesn't magically guarantee they're going to start absorbing algebra or learning to read. To really get why this is, let's break down what physical health actually does for a student. Basically, poor health disrupts learning at 4 critical stages. First up, without health, you lose access. A child might literally be too weak to walk to school. Then, you lose attention. I mean, you can't concentrate through the brain fog of severe hunger, right? Third, you lose energy. They just don't have the fuel to actively participate in group work or run around during recess. And finally, you lose well-being. They just don't feel emotionally or physically secure enough to engage. So fixing those health disruptions essentially gets the child to the starting line. It makes them ready. But the race hasn't even started yet. Let's look at a real-world example of this exact kind of readiness in action. Working alongside the World Food Program, CAPE launched Cambodia's very first school breakfast program. And at first, the theory worked flawlessly. They provided a school breakfast, which immediately reduced hunger, and that in turn massively improved both attendance and concentration in the classroom. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a huge victory. It brilliantly solved the exact problem it targeted. The kids were officially ready to learn. But remember what we just said? Readiness is not the same thing as learning itself. So I want to pivot the narrative sharply right here. Take a second and just picture this child from the breakfast program. They're well-fed, perfectly nourished, physically healthy, and they're showing up to school every single day with perfect attendance. Now, imagine that newly ready, energized kid walking through the doors of a completely failing classroom environment. All that potential, all that readiness, it's about to hit a brick wall. Because here's the thing, removing one barrier, like hunger, does absolutely nothing to remove the surrounding systemic barriers in the education system. Think about it. If our healthy, well-fed kid sits in a room where the teacher is frequently absent, what are they actually learning? Nothing. What if the whole teaching method is just mindless, rote, copying off a chalkboard? Or maybe there are massive language barriers, or the classroom feels unsafe, or they don't even have basic materials like textbooks. A child can't just eat a healthy breakfast and then magically teach themselves. You still need effective school leadership and proper instruction. Now, what's really fascinating about the source material here is how it frames this whole concept mathematically. It introduces something called the learning equation, and the core idea is that learning isn't an addition problem. It's actually a multiplication problem made up of interacting conditions. Health is our foundational multiplier. We absolutely have to have it. But it's really just the first variable in a much, much larger equation. So building on this equation, we have to multiply health by attendance. Because even the healthiest kid on the planet isn't going to learn a single thing if they aren't actually present in the classroom consistently. Attendance is what ensures the child is geographically right where they need to be to receive the information. Okay, let's keep going and see how this builds further. Next, we multiply by inclusion. Think about this one deeply for a second. A child can be perfectly healthy and physically sitting at their desk, but if they are marginalized, discriminated against, or scared for their safety, their entire cognitive load is being spent on just surviving, not learning. Inclusion and safety are what ensure the child can actually participate and absorb what's happening around them. Finally, we complete this equation by multiplying by the absolute catalyst of the entire process, quality teaching. At the end of the day, educational quality is what determines if the opportunity for learning, that opportunity we created with health, attendance, and inclusion, is actually realized. The teacher is the one who takes all of that readiness and actually converts it into knowledge and real skills. There's a quote from the material that really drives home the brutal mathematical reality of this multiplier analogy. It says, if just one critical factor is very weak, the entire learning process can be undermined. Remember elementary school math? Anything multiplied by 0 is 0. If you have a 100% perfect nutrition program, but your teaching quality is at absolute 0 because the teacher never shows up, the resulting learning outcome is 0. If inclusion is severely lacking, the whole process just collapses. You cannot substitute one factor for another. They all rely entirely on each other to work. And that brings us to a really major flaw in how organizations often approach development. We have this tendency to fund a health project over here, and a separate teacher training project over there, and maybe a governance project somewhere else. But here is a fundamental truth we have to remember. Students do not experience siloed independent projects. They experience one singular, unified school ecosystem. To the kid, it's all just school. The quality of their education is simply how all these different factors interact with each other at once. We really have to draw a sharp line between these two mindsets. The old, kind of outdated way is the linear model. One input leading to one guaranteed output. We feed them, they learn. We build a physical classroom, they learn. If only it were that easy, right? We could just drop off a truckload of sandwiches and some bricks and call it a day. But it's just way too simplistic. The reality on the ground demands a systems model. We have to recognize that educational quality is an entire ecosystem of contributing factors. True, lasting improvement, that only comes from tackling these constraints together, in harmony, rather than trying to just fix them one by one in total isolation. And that is exactly where Cambodia's child-friendly school framework comes into play. It's essentially the blueprint and really the perfect antidote to those siloed projects we were just talking about. It requires action across 6 distinct interconnected dimensions all at the same time. Inclusive education, quality teaching, safety and nutrition, gender responsiveness, stakeholder outreach, and robust school governance. This framework boldly acknowledges that no single dimension is enough on its own. Quality teaching is what converts participation into learning, sure, but school governance creates the conditions to sustain it, and outreach extends that support right out into the community. They all reinforce each other. So, the crucial point here is how we actually apply this knowledge. What are the practical takeaways for policymakers and program designers? Well, first off, absolutely keep investing in health. Children literally cannot learn when their basic needs aren't being met. But second, we have to set realistic expectations for standalone interventions. A feeding program isn't going to magically transform a nation's test scores all by itself. We have to intimately link health interventions to educational quality, diagnose the full range of barriers specific to a community, and design integrated, whole-school interventions right from the ground up. As we reach the end of this explainer, I want to go back and completely reframe our initial question. Instead of asking if a healthy child will automatically learn, we need to be asking this: under what conditions does improved health actually enable improved learning? It changes the whole paradigm. It forces us to look way past those easy silver bullets and start looking really deeply at the classroom environment, the teaching methods, the school leadership, and the community support. Ultimately, it all boils down to this really powerful formula. Successful learners require us to support the whole child, the whole classroom, and the whole school. Because at the end of the day, a healthy child trapped in a failing system is just a tragedy of wasted potential. By embracing a systems-level approach, we can ensure that when we finally get our children physically ready to learn, we actually deliver the education they deserve. So think about the projects happening in your own communities right now. Are they linear, or are they truly systemic? It's definitely a question worth asking. Thanks so much for joining me to explore this incredible material today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.